News, views, voices of the global Indian community. India abroad.
Well, we're pleased to see that you still have a vibrant democracy. People were concerned that maybe they kind of broken the wheels of democracy, and to see the regional parties resurgent as well as Congress have some life. But at the same time, for the Prime Minister that we've come to know and engage in a lot of different forums, that we see good defense cooperation, economic reforms as a partner is also very, I think, heartwarming. So I think on both fronts, a lot of Americans are kind of pleased with the result. Still get to work with who we like, but also seeing the democracy is functioning well and appropriately. Well, I think helpfully when you look at the coalition partners that at least at the outset are going to make up the coalition, we shouldn't have, I think, any dramatic reasons to be concerned that it's going to derail some of the good things that we had in U.S.-India cooperation. I've got a lot of experience working with the Telugu Desam Party, who in a lot of ways are more reform-oriented even than the BJP, and of course the Janata Dal United in Bihar, which is overridingly focused on what kind of development can be brought to their home state, which, as we know, is one of the least developed states in India. So in as much as they can use the seat in Delhi to try to bring some development assistance back to the state of Bihar, if the United States can find ways to be a partner in that, I don't think they're going to serve to kind of derail some of the things happening in U.S.-India cooperation. Well, very, very different approaches. Chandrababu Naidu has long been recognized as really kind of positioning himself as a bit of a global leader, and a lot of the things he did when he was earlier Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, especially undivided Andhra Pradesh, empowering senior bureaucrats, trying to attract foreign investment, and really focusing on development issues that may have been ignored. Like, for instance, one of the first leaders in all of India to talk about the earlier HIV and AIDS crisis. A lot of that kind of wraps up and speaks to Americans and what we want to see for economic development and human development. Bihar is a lot less traveled by the United States. You don't have as many executives going there, as many senior U.S. government representatives are going there. But at the same time, you've seen steady progress in a lot of Nitish Kumar's big priorities, getting kids back in school, building roads and bridges. I would say it's been slowed down a little bit of recently because they've had some wobbliness in Bihar in terms of their own coalition, darting between the BJP and the RJD. Tough to run a government and be consistent when you've got a different partner, a lot of times which has more seats every couple of years. So the United States has less engagement with Bihar, less engagement with the Janata Dal United. But again, now that they got a seat in Delhi, hopefully we'll begin to repair that. Well, we've seen, I think, a dramatic period of reforms out of the gates when the Modi government first took office back in 2014. In terms of FDI liberalization, you saw about 40 positive moves on FDI the first couple of years. You began to see a lot of domestic deregulation in areas like GST and the bankruptcy code, and also a lot of targeting on this idea of cooperative competitive federalism, challenging states to have a better business environment. But about midway through its first term and into the second term, a real slowdown in some of those big reforms. It wasn't because of COVID, because, of course, even in the middle of COVID, they initiated some of the bigger reforms of the second term. But, you just saw a big slowdown. They started to lose state elections. They were concerned about the national election. And so that was a bit of a pause. Hopefully they can get back on the horse. We've heard a lot of conversation about the 100 or the 150-day agenda, a lot of things they want to get out of the gates. You've seen recent interest in things like signing trade deals with some of their significant trading partners and a few more that are on the table. Hopefully that won't get derailed. But also going back and repairing some of the things that were done but could have been done a little bit better, like improving the GST, reducing the number of rates, trying to include items that weren't originally included, and also a lot of areas related to energy that are critical to try to work on as well. So a big agenda, of course, and hopefully these new partnerships won't impede that in any way. Well, I think there's some areas when you talk about difficult legislative reforms, anytime you got a coalition and it's hard to rally the troops, at least in the lower house of parliament, because of course they never had a majority in the upper house, it gets a little bit trickier. So if you're talking about big changes on the goods and services tax, things like that are maybe a little bit more tricky, it could be more difficult in a coalition environment. But a lot of areas they might look at on further liberalization of FDI. I think some of these narrow but significant trade agreements. I don't suspect that being in the coalition is going to have any big impact on a lot of those steps. I do think cooperative competitive federalism gets a little bit tougher. If they're going to do rankings of business environments and one of their coalition partner states is near the bottom of that list, the political repercussions for potentially putting out a list where, let's say, Bihar is on the bottom of a list could be kind of dangerous. So I think some of this stoking they tried to do early on getting states to improve are a little bit trickier in a coalition as well. So some areas, FDI caps, trade, I think are going to be unchanged. Legislation and cooperative competitive federalism get a little bit tougher in a coalition. Yeah, that'll be trickier. There's small steps you can do on agriculture reform that I think will be less dangerous to do. But the big package they tried to do a couple of years ago, it's difficult to imagine trying to enact that again in a coalition scenario. I don't think the U.S.-India relationship is going to be impacted in any dramatic way. The area that we've actually seen the most progress is on U.S.-India military ties. And I don't suspect under a coalition arrangement you're going to see a dramatic change. I mean, the drivers for India's, I think, cooperation with the United States, particularly some of the dangerous elements of the rise of China, are unchanged. And I think any coalition configuration is going to say, China presents a threat. The United States is a critical partner for access to defense technology, for deeper defense interoperability. So I suspect, defense will be absolutely unchanged. I think the Modi government's going to have a free hand to do what they've been doing recently in a deepening of the partnership. On economic cooperation, again, some of the areas on launching PLI programs for domestic support, some narrow trade deals, that stuff I think is going to remain unchanged. But yeah, some of the deeper liberalizations that the United States companies are hoping for, challenging states to do better, gets trickier. And ultimately, if India is going to be that next big manufacturing powerhouse, most of the actions that have to take place are with state governments, not with the national government. So I think Modi will have a little bit less of a hand to challenge states to do. So security unchanged, economic cooperation, you'll see some modest modifications. Well, they're probably to some extent happy and comfortable because they've seen Modi stepping up and challenging China, not just directly, but also in terms of building cooperation directly with the United States, but through the Quad. So if they think this reduces Modi's hand to some even minor extent, probably a good thing from Beijing's viewpoint. Although I think if they had a sober analysis, they'd realize as long as China's pushing the envelope on the border, the maritime domain, as long as they have this massive trade imbalance, again, the drivers in India politically, irrespective of who's running the country, are unchanged. And I think India is going to be looking for partnerships. So nominally, probably Beijing would look at this as relatively okay and better, but not a dramatic swing from Beijing's view.